In the spring of 1904, in a small meeting room in Paris, 7 men from 7 nations sat around a table and made a decision that would quietly change the world. They were not heads of state. They were not billionaires. They were football administrators, men who loved a game that was still finding its shape. On the 21st of May, 1904, they signed a document and called their new organization the Fédération Internationale de Football Association. Nobody at that table could have imagined what they had started. Nobody could have foreseen that this modest administrative body would one day govern a sport played by 211 member nations, more than the United Nations itself, and host a tournament watched by billions of people on every inhabited continent on Earth. This is the story of FIFA. It is a story of vision and corruption, of glory and greed, of beautiful football and very ugly politics. It is the story of the most powerful organization in sport and perhaps the most complicated. The founding members were France, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and Switzerland. Notably absent were England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, the nations that had actually invented the game. Robert Durand of France became FIFA's first president, a man who believed football needed a single governing body to prevent the chaos of conflicting rules. FIFA in those earliest years had almost no money and almost no authority. It was, in the bluntest terms, a skeleton waiting for a body. Daniel Burley Woolfall of England succeeded Durand in 1906, and under his stewardship, FIFA organized football's presence at the 1908 and 1912 Olympic Games, giving the organization its first real sense of purpose. But World War I brought everything to a halt. Woolfall died in 1918, and FIFA limped into the 1920s diminished and uncertain. Then came the man who would build it into something that mattered. Jules Rimet became FIFA president in 1921 and held that position for 33 years, the longest tenure in the organization's history. Rimet believed international football could serve as a force for peace between nations. He was not wrong about the idea. He was working in a world, however, that frequently proved him right for all the wrong reasons. It was Jules Rimet who made the World Cup happen. Uruguay was chosen as host of the first FIFA World Cup in 1930. They had won the Olympic tournament in 1924 and 1928. They were celebrating a century of independence, and they agreed to fund the entire tournament. Only 13 nations competed in Montevideo. Lucien Laurent of France scored the very first World Cup goal in the 12th minute against Mexico on the 13th of July, 1930. Uruguay defeated Argentina 4-2 in the final in front of 93,000 people. The Jules Rimet Trophy, a gold-plated sterling silver statuette depicting Nike, the Greek goddess of victory, had found its first owner. Jules Rimet's dream had become reality. What followed immediately tells you how football and politics were already inseparable. The 1934 World Cup in Mussolini's Italy was used as a propaganda vehicle, with intense political pressure placed on the Azzurri to win. Allegations of referee manipulation have followed that tournament through history. Italy did win, defeating Czechoslovakia 2-1 in the final, and then won again in France in 1938, the first team to win consecutive World Cups. Then the Second World War consumed everything, and the World Cup went dark for 12 years. When football returned in 1950, Brazil hosted a tournament that produced one of sport's most psychologically devastating moments. In the Maracanã Stadium, with an estimated 200,000 people inside, still the largest crowd ever to attend a football match, Brazil needed only a draw to be world champions. Uruguay needed to win. In what became known as the Maracanazo, Uruguay won 2-1. Brazilian goalkeeper Moacir Barbosa carried the blame for the rest of his life, dying in 2000, still haunted by it. Uruguay were world champions for the second time, and the World Cup had proven it could break the hearts of nations, not just teams. The 1954 World Cup in Switzerland gave the world its first great tactical upset. Hungary entered with 31 unbeaten matches, had destroyed England 8-3 at Wembley the year before, and crushed West Germany 8-3 in the group stage. In the final, Hungary led 2-0 after 8 minutes. West Germany came back to win 3-2. The miracle of Bern became a foundational moment in West German national identity, arriving just 9 years after the war's end. Football was already doing what Rimet always said it could, carrying the weight of nations on its shoulders. Then came 1958. A 17-year-old Brazilian named Edson Arantes do Nascimento, Pelé, scored twice in the final as Brazil defeated Sweden 5-2. His arrival was not just a football moment, it was a cultural event. Pelé went on to score 77 goals in 92 international appearances, won 3 World Cups, and became for decades the undisputed benchmark by which all other players were judged. Brazil won again in Chile in 1962, and then in 1966, England hosted the World Cup and won it, their only title in history, with Jeff Hurst completing a hat trick against West Germany in a final that included the most debated goal in World Cup history, a ball ruled to have crossed the line from a crossbar bounce that Germany have contested ever since. The 1970 World Cup in Mexico remains for many historians the greatest tournament ever staged. Brazil played football of such beauty and technical sophistication that it redefined what the game could be. Jairzinho scored in every single match, a feat never repeated. Their 4-1 demolition of Italy in the final was a performance of such fluid, joyful brilliance that it has been studied and celebrated for over 50 years. Brazil were given permanent possession of the Jules Rimet Trophy. A new trophy would be commissioned, the FIFA World Cup trophy we know today, designed by Italian sculptor Silvio Gazzaniga, made of 18-karat gold, depicting 2 figures holding up the earth. Then came 1974, and with it one of the most consequential elections in the history of sport. João Havelange of Brazil defeated England's Stanley Rouse to become FIFA's first non-European president, running on an explicit platform of expanding football's reach to Africa, Asia, and the Americas. His election shifted FIFA's center of gravity away from Europe and toward a truly global model. Rouse's own legacy carries a significant stain. His handling of apartheid South Africa's membership was found by critics and historians to reflect a Eurocentric worldview that had no place governing world football. Havelange delivered on his expansion promises. He secured sponsorship deals with Adidas and Coca-Cola that transformed FIFA's finances, funded youth competitions worldwide, and grew the World Cup from 16 teams in 1974 to 24 in 1982, then to 32 in 1998. These were genuine achievements, but Havelange's legacy is inseparable from corruption. Investigations spanning decades and ultimately findings by FIFA's own ethics committee established that he had accepted millions of dollars in bribes, described formally as disloyal payments, from the sports marketing company ISL, which held FIFA's broadcasting rights. ISL went bankrupt in 2001. Havelange resigned from his position as FIFA honorary president in 2013 before formal sanction could be applied. He was never criminally convicted, but the documented evidence destroyed any simple reading of his presidency as a success story of global expansion. On the field, the 1982 World Cup in Spain produced Paolo Rossi, who returned from a match-fixing ban to score 6 goals and lead Italy to the title. Argentina's 1986 tournament in Mexico produced Diego Maradona. His performance remains the most complete individual domination of a World Cup by a single player in the competition's history. Against England in the quarterfinal, Maradona scored 2 goals in 5 minutes that could not have been more different. The first was the infamous Hand of God, a goal deliberately scored with his hand that the referee failed to spot in a match played 5 years after the Falkland War. Then, 4 minutes later, Maradona received the ball in his own half, turned, and ran 55 meters, beating 6 English players and the goalkeeper to score what was voted the goal of the century in a worldwide poll. 2 goals, one scandalous, one transcendent, in the same match from the same man. Argentina won the World Cup, and Maradona was the whole reason why. The 1994 World Cup in the United States ended in the lowest scoring final in history. Italy and Brazil drawing 0-0, with Brazil winning on penalties. Roberto Baggio's missed penalty, the ball sailing over the crossbar, became one of sport's most enduring images of individual heartbreak. Then, in France, 1998, Zinedine Zidane scored twice as the host nation defeated Brazil 3-0 in the final. The circumstances surrounding that final, Ronaldo's mysterious pre-match health episode and his subsequent inclusion in the starting lineup, have been investigated and debated without definitive resolution. What is certain is that Brazil's performance was uncharacteristically poor, and the full story of that night has never been fully told. Sepp Blatter succeeded Havelange as FIFA president in 1998 and would serve until his suspension in 2015, 17 years of real achievement entangled with catastrophic scandal. The 2002 World Cup in South Korea and Japan produced extraordinary surprises, with the host nation reaching the semifinals in matches whose refereeing decisions have been disputed ever since. Brazil won, with Ronaldo scoring both goals in a 2-0 defeat of Germany to complete one of football's great comeback narratives. The 2006 final in Germany is remembered for Zidane's headbutt on Italian defender Marco Materazzi in extra time, earning the Frenchman a red card in the final game of his career. Italy won on penalties. The image of Zidane walking past the World Cup trophy as he left the field is one of football's most iconic and melancholy photographs. The September 2015 Department of Justice indictments of multiple FIFA officials marked the formal arrival of accountability in a governance culture that had operated in the shadows for decades. 14 individuals were initially charged with wire fraud, racketeering, and money laundering, covering 24 years of corruption in broadcasting and marketing rights. Chuck Blazer, the former CONCACAF General Secretary, became an FBI informant and admitted accepting bribes related to the 1994 and 1998 World Cups. Sepp Blatter was suspended and eventually banned from football for 6 years by FIFA's Ethics Committee. Michel Platini, UEFA president and presumed Blatter's successor, was banned over a 2 million Swiss franc payment from Blatter that FIFA's Ethics Committee found lacked any legitimate contractual basis. His presidential ambitions were destroyed. The awards of the 2018 World Cup to Russia and the 2022 World Cup to Qatar generated controversy extending well beyond football. An internal FIFA investigation, the Garcia Report, found numerous irregularities in both bidding processes. When FIFA's adjudicator published only a summary, misrepresenting the findings according to Garcia himself, who resigned in protest, the full report was eventually released in 2017. FIFA concluded the level of misconduct did not warrant stripping either nation of their tournaments, a conclusion many observers found implausible. Qatar's tournament required the World Cup to be moved to November and December for the first time, disrupting domestic leagues worldwide. Investigations by Amnesty International and others documented deaths, wage theft, and dangerous conditions among the migrant workers who built the stadiums. The Qatari government disputed specific figures and pointed to labor reforms introduced under international pressure. What is beyond dispute is that workers died, conditions were dangerous, and FIFA's public response was widely criticized as insufficient. On the field, Qatar 2022 may have produced the greatest World Cup final ever played. Morocco became the first African nation to reach a World Cup semifinal, defeating Spain and Portugal along the way. Argentina, in what was universally understood as Lionel Messi's final World Cup, lost their opening match to Saudi Arabia in one of the tournament's biggest ever upsets, then recovered to reach the final against France. Leading 2-0 with 10 minutes remaining, Argentina appeared to be cruising when Kylian Mbappe scored twice in 90 seconds. Extra time arrived, Messi scored again, Mbappe completed a hat trick. At 3-3, Argentina finally won on penalties. Messi held the World Cup trophy. For a man whose entire international career had been shadowed by that absence, who had lost 3 Copa America finals and a World Cup final before finally winning, the image resolved what had become football's defining debate. The argument about Messi, Pelé, and Maradona will never truly end, but something that had felt incomplete was finally complete. Gianni Infantino, elected FIFA president in February 2016 on the platform of transparency and reform, has expanded the World Cup to 48 teams beginning with 2026, hosted across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. The expansion has genuine advocates, more nations, more stories, more of the world included in the conversation. It has genuine critics, those who argue quality will be diluted, and the 32-team format already produces mismatched contests. Infantino himself has faced an ongoing Swiss criminal investigation related to meetings with a Swiss attorney general who was simultaneously investigating FIFA corruption. He was re-elected unopposed in 2023. The questions about his presidency will outlast his tenure, as similar questions have outlasted every FIFA president before him. What is FIFA stripped of the gold and the glory? It is a Swiss-registered non-profit that distributes money to 211 member associations, funds development programs on every continent, sets the laws of the game, and organizes competitions including the World Cup and the Women's World Cup, which has grown from a modest 1991 tournament in China to the 2023 edition in Australia and New Zealand that shattered records worldwide, with Spain winning in a final against England watched by hundreds of millions. These are genuine public goods. And yet FIFA's governance model, one in which enormous individual power sits with federation representatives, where votes can be cultivated through financial relationships, and where the president's office has historically operated with minimal accountability, has proven uniquely vulnerable to the corruption the 2015 indictments finally exposed. The reforms since 2015 are real but incomplete. The questions remain open, and the World Cup will keep happening. Every 4 years, on new grass and under new skies, with new players carrying the hopes of their countries and new supporters arriving with the conviction that this time, this tournament, this summer will belong to them. There is something in the World Cup that transcends the organization that owns it. The trophy, kept in a vault in Zurich, with only a replica permitted to be touched by anyone other than winners and heads of state, carries meanings far beyond football. When Pelé wept on a teammate's shoulder in Stockholm in 1958, when Maradona raised his arms to the Mexican sky in 1986, when Zidane, son of Algerian immigrants, lifted the trophy in Paris, and a country decided for one night that football had shown them who they could be. When Messi finally stood in the lucile darkness, the weight of a lifetime's longing transformed into relief and joy. These moments belong to football. They belong to the people who watched them. They belong to the children who saw them and decided they would spend their lives trying to do something that beautiful. That is what Jules Rimet and those 7 men in Paris began in 1904. They created something that grew beyond any of them, beyond any scandal or commercial deal or corrupt official, into something that now feels as permanent and as necessary as the seasons themselves. The game is bigger than FIFA. It always was. It always will be.